Hey, what's going on, guys? Today I'll be breaking down the AFC North teams' schedules and talk about what I think their records will be at the end of the 2025 season. This on another episode of... So, first up in the AFC North, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. In week 1, the Bengals get to travel to play the Browns, and I think they win this game. The Bengals, especially this early in the season, should be better than the Browns. The Browns have a better defense with Myles Garrett, but the Bengals' offense is far superior. In week 2, the Bengals get to host the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I think they win this game. The Jaguars aren't as good as the Bengals. They don't have as much talent on offense, and their defense, while I think it is a little better than the Bengals' defense, is not that much better. In week 3, the Bengals get to travel to play the Minnesota Vikings, and I think they lose this game. This is more about the Vikings' defense and that pass rush being better, and the Bengals not having that good of a defense to match. In week 4, the Bengals get to travel to play the Denver Broncos, and I think they win this game. This game is mainly about the Bengals' offense going up against that Broncos defense, and when it comes down to it, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are too good to lose. In week 5, the Bengals get to host the Detroit Lions, and I think the Lions will win this game. They're just a more complete team than the Bengals. They're good on offense and defense, where the Bengals' main strength is on offense. In week 6, the Bengals get to travel now to play the Green Bay Packers, and I think the Bengals will win this game. The Packers' defense, while it is serviceable, I think they won't be able to hold up against that Bengals onslaught. In week 7, the Bengals get to host the Pittsburgh Steelers, and at home, I think they get the win. In week 8, the Bengals get to host the New York Jets, and I think they win this game. The Jets, while they will have a very talented roster this year, I don't think they will be nearly as good at putting up points as the Cincinnati Bengals. In week 9, the Bengals get to host the Chicago Bears, and I actually think they lose this game. The Bears roster is extremely talented heading into this season, and I think it'll be a close game, but the Bears, I think, with their better defense, should be able to win. In week 10, the Bengals get their bye, and in week 11, they travel to play the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh. And coming off their bye, it doesn't matter. I think the Steelers will win at home against the Bengals. In week 12, the Bengals get to host the New England Patriots, and I think the Patriots will win this game. The Patriots are actually a team I think that will be very much improved in 2025, and they'll prove it here by beating the Bengals. In week 13, the Bengals get to travel to play the Baltimore Ravens, and I think in a shootout they lose because the Ravens have a better defense. In week 14, the Bengals now get to travel to play the Buffalo Bills, and I think they win this game. The Bengals and the Bills are both two of the better offenses heading into 2025, but I think this game will be a shootout, much like how the Bengals will play when they go up against any other good team this year. In week 15, the Bengals get to host the Ravens at home, and I say they'll split the series with the Ravens and win here at home. In week 16, the Bengals get to travel to play the Miami Dolphins, and I think the Dolphins at home will win this game. The Dolphins have a lot of good playmakers on offense. Like the Bengals, they have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane. But what I think actually will help the Dolphins in this matchup is their defense and it being better than the Bengals' defense. In week 17, the Bengals get to host the Arizona Cardinals, and I think at home they win this game. And in week 18, the Bengals get to host the Cleveland Browns, and at home in week 18 to finish out the season, I think the Bengals win. So with that being said, the Bengals end their year with a record of 10-7. Next up in the AFC North, we have the Cleveland Browns. And, like mentioned previously, in week 1, the Browns get to play the Cincinnati Bengals at home. And I think they lose this game just because there's so much unknown about their team at this point. In week 2, the Browns don't catch a break because now they have to travel to play the Baltimore Ravens. And I think that's another loss, especially because they're playing in Baltimore. In week 3, the Browns get to host the Green Bay Packers, and I think that's another loss. Unfortunately, I think the Packers on offense are a much better team than Cleveland will be in the upcoming season. In week 4, the Browns get to travel to play the Detroit Lions, and I think that's another loss. The Lions are just a much more complete team on both sides of the ball than the Cleveland Browns. In week 5, the Cleveland Browns will now be hosting the Minnesota Vikings, and I think that's yet another loss for them. In week 6, the Browns get to travel to play the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh, and with the Steelers coming off their bye at home, they're going to win. In week 7, the Browns get to host the Miami Dolphins, and here I actually think the Browns will win. Their defense should be able to take advantage of a Dolphins team that is very prone to having their quarterback sacked and hurt. In week 8, the Browns get to travel to play the New England Patriots, and I think they'll win this game. Hopefully, by this point in the season, their quarterback, whoever their quarterback is, has developed into an actually decent starter. And with their defense being the main strength of the team, I think they can take advantage and beat the New England Patriots. In week 9, they get their bye. And in week 10, they get to travel to play the New York Jets. And with both teams coming off their bye and the Jets being at home, I think the Jets win. I think Justin Fields and the New York Jets will be able to pull out a win against the Cleveland Browns. In week 11, the Browns get to host the Baltimore Ravens, and I'm just going to pick a wild upset here and say somehow the Browns will win at home against the Baltimore Ravens. In week 12, the Browns get to travel to play the Las Vegas Raiders, and I think the Browns will lose this game. The Raiders, while not being a perfect organization, I think will be able to beat the Browns at home. In week 13, the Browns get to host the San Francisco 49ers, and unfortunately for the Browns, the Niners are a much better team. They're better on offense, and while not being better on defense, their defense is not that far behind. So I think the 49ers will beat up on the Browns in week 13. In week 14, the Browns get to host the Tennessee Titans. I actually think the Titans will win this game. Hopefully by this point in the season, Cam Ward has developed into a somewhat good starter in the NFL. And the Titans, going up against the Browns, who I think will be one of the weaker AFC teams this year, will be able to get the win. In week 15, the Browns get to travel to play the Chicago Bears. And this is just not going to be fun for the Browns. I feel like the Bears on offense have enough talent on that O-line and in their skill positions to beat up even on that Browns defense, which I think is going to be the highlight of the team in 2025. In week 16, the Browns get to host the Buffalo Bills, and they get the loss because Josh Allen is just better, and I'm not really going to go into it that much. In week 17, the Browns get to host the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think the Browns lose this game. The Steelers, with Aaron Rodgers, should be the better team, especially considering how good that defense is for the Pittsburgh Steelers now that Jalen Ramsey is there. And to finish out the season, the Browns get to travel to Cincinnati to play the Bengals, and as I've already said in this video, they're going to lose. So the Browns finished out their 2025 season with a record of 3-14. Next up in the AFC North, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. And in week 1, the Steelers get to travel to play the New York Jets, and I think they'll lose. This is a double revenge game for Justin Fields and Aaron Rodgers, and I think the Jets come out on top. In week 2, the Steelers get to host the Seattle Seahawks, and I think the Sam Darnold Seahawks actually win against the Pittsburgh Steelers here. The Seahawks have a great roster. They brought in Cooper Kupp. They brought in Sam Darnold. The Steelers also have a decent roster. This is the DK Metcalf revenge game, but I don't think the Steelers will win here. In week 3, the Steelers get to travel to play the New England Patriots, and I think they're a better team, so they will get a win here against the New England Patriots. In week 4, the Steelers get to host the Minnesota Vikings, and I think the Minnesota Vikings will win this game, even though Aaron Rodgers is probably a better quarterback than J.J. McCarthy. That Vikings roster is much more talented on offense than the Steelers roster, so I think the Vikings will get the win as long as McCarthy is mediocrely good. In Week 5, the Steelers get their bye, and in Week 6, they get to host the Cleveland Browns coming off their bye, in which they will win. In Week 7, the Steelers get to travel to play Cincinnati Bengals, and I think the Bengals will win this game. The Bengals offense, even with Aaron Rodgers, even with DK Metcalf, their offense is better. So as long as the Bengals defense does the bare minimum, the Steelers, I think, will get out-dueled. In Week 8, the Steelers get to host the Green Bay Packers, and I think the Steelers will win this game. Their defense should be good enough to put the clamps on Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers. In Week 9, the Steelers get to host the Indianapolis Colts, and I think that's another win. The Colts will have a lot of issues this upcoming year, especially at the quarterback position, so I think the Steelers will be able to win. In Week 10, the Steelers get to travel to play the LA Chargers, and I think the Steelers will win this game. The Chargers, their offense, I think, is better on paper than the Pittsburgh Steelers, even with the additions the Steelers have made. But on defense, I think the Steelers are a lot better, so I think that will give the Steelers the edge. In Week 11, the Steelers get to host the Cincinnati Bengals, and I think the Bengals will lose to the Steelers here in Week 11. In Week 12, the Steelers get to travel to play the Chicago Bears, and I think they'll lose this game. Chicago has a much improved offense, and their defense isn't that half bad, so I think they should be able to pull out the win and beat up on Aaron Rodgers. In Week 13, the Steelers get to host the Buffalo Bills, and unfortunately, I think they'll lose because Josh Allen and the Bills are better than what the Steelers have right now. In Week 14, the Steelers get to travel to play the Baltimore Ravens, and I think they lose this game. The Ravens are just a more talented team, and they have a better quarterback, so I think that'll be the tail of this game. In Week 15, Steelers get to host the Miami Dolphins. And now that the trades went down for Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith, I think this is a nice revenge game here where the Steelers, with their new pieces, get to beat up on the Miami Dolphins. In Week 16, the Steelers get to travel to play the Detroit Lions, and I think they'll lose this game. The Lions are just a more well-rounded team on both sides of the ball, and Dan Campbell's aggressive coaching style will give the Lions the advantage. In Week 17, the Steelers get to travel to play the Cleveland Browns, and I think in Cleveland the Steelers will win. And in Week 18, to finish out their season, the Pittsburgh Steelers get to host the Baltimore Ravens in Pittsburgh, and I think they get the win here. I think they split the series with the Baltimore Ravens and finish their season with a record of 9-8. And to finish out the AFC North, we have the Baltimore Ravens. In Week 1, the Ravens get to travel to play the Buffalo Bills, and I think they get revenge for the 2024 playoff game and win against the Bills. In Week 2, the Ravens get to host the Cleveland Browns, and I think they'll win this game easily. In Week 3, the Ravens now get to host the Detroit Lions, and this matchup should be really good. I'm very excited to watch it. But I think the Ravens will come out on top. Lamar Jackson is better than Jared Goff. And that Ravens defense is not a pushover. So I think in the Clash of the Titans, it'll be close, but I think the Ravens will win. In Week 4, the Ravens get to travel out to play the Kansas City Chiefs. And as much as I want to say the Ravens would win this game, I think the Chiefs will win. In Week 5, the Ravens get to play the Houston Texans at home, and I think they'll win this game. The Texans, I wouldn't say they've gotten a lot better this offseason. Their O-line, I think there's still questions there, and the Ravens defense, as long as it rebounds from its decline in 2024, I think they should be able to beat up on the Texans. In Week 6, the Baltimore Ravens get to host the LA Rams, and in what should be a really good game that I'll be at, I think the Ravens will win. As much as I want to say the Rams will win because I'm biased that way, I just feel like the Ravens will pull it out. In Week 7, the Ravens get their bye, And in week 8, the Ravens get to host the Chicago Bears. And coming off their bye, they should be able to beat up on the Bears. In week 9, the Baltimore Ravens get to travel to play the Miami Dolphins. And in an upset, I think the Dolphins will actually win this game. In week 10, the Ravens get to travel to play the Minnesota Vikings. And I think the Ravens will beat the Minnesota Vikings. In week 11, the Ravens get to travel to play the Cleveland Browns. And I'm going to pick the upset and say the Browns find a way to beat the Baltimore Ravens at home. In week 12, the Baltimore Ravens get to host the New York Jets. And I think the Ravens win this game. The Jets, I don't think will be able to handle what the Ravens have on that roster on both the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. In week 13, the Ravens get to host the Cincinnati Bengals, and I think the Ravens at home will win. Of course, I think it'll be close because that Bengals offense will make it close, but I don't think the Ravens will lose. In week 14, the Ravens get to host the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think at home they win. The Steelers have had trouble playing against the Ravens in Baltimore last year, and I think that continues in 2025. In week 15, the Baltimore Ravens get to travel to play the Cincinnati Bengals, and I think they split the series here with the Bengals due to both games being likely shootouts. In week 16, the Ravens get to host the New England Patriots, and I think they win this game somewhat easily. The Patriots, while improved, are not to the Ravens level yet. In week 17, the Ravens will be traveling to play the Green Bay Packers, and I think they win this game. The Packers aren't as good on defense or on offense as the Ravens, and I think the Ravens will pull out the win. And to finish out the season, the Ravens get to travel to play the Pittsburgh Steelers in a game I think they'll lose and split the series with the Steelers. So I think the Ravens end their season with a record of 12-5. So with that being said, guys, please like, share, subscribe, and comment what you thought. Tell me what you think, and I'll see you next time.